Hey guys, welcome back to whatever this is. So for today, I actually want to talk about something I've been actually getting an opportunity to play with that I've never had before. I've always been interested in the Sega Saturn, and I don't know why, but it's probably because I love the Dreamcast. So I was always fascinated by what games this system actually had. And I've actually recently had the opportunity to really sit down and enjoy a lot of games on this. I haven't put that many hours into that many, but I was able to sprinkle around and kind of figure out, wow, some of these games are incredible and are locked onto this unit. It's amazing just what actually came out on it. It died in North America horribly, probably because of Sega, lack of 3D, and how they released this system. That's a whole other bag I don't want to get into. What I do want to talk about is the games that are locked on here and are incredible. The first game I even would remotely mention is Burning Rangers. I have always wanted to play that game since I was a little kid, as you were a firefighter who puts out fires with laser beams, and you save people and they teleport away, and nobody knows where they go, but I assume somewhere safe because firefighters. Very fun game, very obviously arcadey, which is what Sega's known for. Really fun game, but again, highly expensive on the resale market. But having the opportunity to actually sit down and play it, I was able to get through most of it because it is an incredibly short game. Very, very fun. Another game I was actually able to sit and play through on it is one of my personal favorites, was Mega Man 8. I had always heard that Mega Man 8 on the Sega Saturn had the better soundtrack. And by God, does the sound on the Sega Saturn impress me so much. There are notes I hadn't heard while playing the game before that were being pumped out of this. Unfortunately, the Sega Saturn version is not the one they use when they port it around. They use the PlayStation one because it's much easier to use a PlayStation than it is a Sega Saturn emulator, which is cool. Don't get me wrong, it makes more sense to use that version. But the Sega Saturn version specifically had a couple things added, which were it had 2 extra bosses and obviously the improved sound quality. I would say the Sega Saturn version is the best version of it. But again, that game goes for an inherently lot of money. But I had someone who was able to help me out and just try all these games out, which is more or less what I was doing for a few days. Another game I got to play was Magical Knight Rayearth, another really expensive title. Fantastic game. Why is this game not ported anywhere? I understand it's got the licensing issue. Sega developed the game. It is really good. It's a Zelda clone pretty much through and through. You have the 3 main girls, and it's fantastic. I would recommend playing that through any means, as if you like your Zelda games. I really hope maybe one day it'll show up somewhere else, because that game deserves a second chance. It was a game called Deep Fear. It is awful, but in the best possible way. It's like the B horror flick where the dialogue's terrible. It's a horror game, but it ends up coming off as more hilarious than anything. I'd recommend that one if you ever had the chance. One game I always knew I wanted to play on this was the game that I got addicted to in the arcade, which was Die Hard Arcade, or Dynamite Deca 1. That game is hilarious. It's supposed to be Die Hard. It's clearly not Die Hard, but I'll take it because it's a fun 3D beat 'em up, and there really wasn't that many of them. There was that and Fighting Force. About it. It's beat 'em up. You punch things, you kick things, you throw things. That's it. 10 out of 10. Fantastic game. The Sega Saturn has a really impressive library, just for what's kind of locked on here, as a lot of games never saw the light of day. If you get a chance, or you can play through other means, I'd recommend checking out the Sega Saturn someday, if you ever have the curiosity strike. And with my exploration into this system, I actually got to try just about every type of controller for the Sega Saturn. The first one being this god-awful monstrosity of a controller. This was the controller the system launched with only in North America, I believe. Maybe Europe, but I don't think so. This controller is awful. This is the worst thing I've ever held. Apparently, this thing has its defenders, and the only question is, because I don't want to say you're wrong, I'm going to ask you, how do you hold it? because I could never figure this out. Because the way it is, like, it either kind of wants me to cut my hands downwards in a way, or like kind of arch over it in a weird way. I'm not quite sure how this one's supposed to be held. And these trigger buttons are kind of squishy and gross. I don't like them. It reminds me of the PS3 controller. Now, this was the controller I wanted to use, as I had always heard this was hands down the best 2D controller. And after playing Mega Man 8 and a few other games with it, yes, I would 100% agree with this. This is a fantastic 2D controller. It's got the 6 face buttons as well as 2 triggers, which for most 2D games, if not all, this is really all you need. If you can just get a clone of this for your PC, I'd recommend that for your 2D games. This would probably be excellent for Cuphead, mainly because I have done it and it is excellent for Cuphead. This is very comfortable. I have no issues. Any issues I have with this controller, I'm going to chalk down to it just being a really old and used controller, because it is very creaky and it's a little heavily scuffed, but those I would put down to this is an old controller and I bought it obviously used. Now this next controller was recommended by a friend of mine while we were playing with it. He brought over the Gen Brawl, or the Brawler Gen. It's made by Retro Fighters, and this controller works for both Genesis and Sega Saturn. Its big draw is that it's got this analog stick here. The D-pad is okay. The triggers are okay. The face buttons are great. But the main reason why you want this one is for those 3D analog games that are on here, such as Nights into Dreams, which is a big one, and like Burning Rangers. This helps make those games so much better. Trying to control them with let alone this controller, but this one, it's a little wonky. You need the analog. You can do it with the digital pad. I wouldn't recommend it that hard. I would say if you can, get this one. This one is actually a really nice, it's a superb controller for the Saturn, and it's only okay for Genesis. The next controller I'm about to show would be the controller I would say use for your Genesis, especially your Genesis Classic. So the last one here is actually a really, really nice controller by Retrobit. So this is a wireless Genesis Sega Saturn controller. It is designed in the Saturn design, Japanese specifically. It's got the 2 red buttons on the top, the 6 face buttons. It's clear, it's got a nice D-pad, and it's rechargeable. This thing works with all of my systems. I was playing River City Girls with it. It works excellent. Played Cuphead with it. Works excellent. On the Switch, I just needed to remap a few of the buttons, but outside that, it was perfectly fine. And it comes with really nice attachments for all of them. It comes with an attachment so that you can then get a receiver. You put this in the front. That's just for the Saturn. And then if you're using the Genesis Classic, which is what this one's used for, it has a USB stick, if I can ever get this thing out. There. It has a USB stick, and this USB stick, obviously you just stick it in and it connects. Works really well with those 2D games. I was even playing Sonic Mania with it, and man, did it feel so right to play that with this controller. So guys, that's all I wanted to say with this week. I had a ton of fun finally getting able to explore the Sega Saturn library. Unfortunately, I gotta give all that stuff back now. But getting a chance to sit down, play some Sega Saturn games that I've tried for playing for years because those games were way too much. I'm incredibly grateful for a friend for helping me out with that. And out of these controllers here, if you're just looking for a universal use, I'd recommend the Retrobit wireless controller. But if you're just wanting something just for this system, I'd recommend the Brawler Gen, which works for both systems, but really you want it for the Saturn. It even has both plugs on the bottom of it, which is But guys, that's it for this episode. That's all I wanted to talk about with the Sega Saturn. And if you get a chance to check it out or decide to play around with it one day, I promise you you'll have a good time. So take care. Have a good one.